It's the Real News Network. I'm Sharmini Pires coming to you from Baltimore. Early Sunday morning, on his 29th birthday, Gavin Long shot 6 cops, killing 3 of them. Gavin Long was known on social media as Cosmos Satipendra. He made various videos to propagate his thoughts online. After the Dallas shooting, he broadcasted this video.
Look, you got to really look at certain things because, say, for instance, the holiday that just passed, Independence Day. Independence Day is really based on, say, George Washington and the Americans fighting against their oppressor, Britain. And we celebrate that. We tell them they're right. You get it? But when an African fights back, it's wrong. But every time a European fights back against his oppressor, he's right. But soon as an African tries to fight back, why is that? So we got to start questioning our mindset. Are our thoughts our own thoughts? Because it doesn't even make sense, the shit we thinking about. You feel me? You got to really question your thoughts because you saying one person is right, but then you saying another person is wrong for doing the same exact fucking thing. In fact, we celebrate it and make holidays about it. It doesn't make sense.
Gavin Long was a Marine sergeant who called himself a freedom strategist. What is going on in this young man's head? To discuss this, I'm joined by Glen Ford of the Black Agenda Report. Glen, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, Glen, what is going on in this young black man who, by all counts that I can gather when I listen to these videos that he had put online, sounds like a frustrated, but, fairly analytical young man.
Well, we have an opportunity here, first of all, to look at the microcosm and the macrocosm, the individual Gavin Long, and then take a look at Black America as a whole. And we also have the opportunity to look at Gavin Long in 2 different periods. What you were just showing is a recent YouTube that shows his response, clearly, of course, before picking up the gun, but after the protests in Baton Rouge and the police repression of those protests occurred. But there are also podcasts available of what he called, this is his radio program, Convos with Cosmo. And in those, we see a person who's an entrepreneurial, rather self-centered, materialistic, thing-loving kind of guy who offers a product, or rather the product is himself. The product's called Cosmo's Way, where he markets himself as a dietitian and a nutritionist and a spiritual advisor. And he is the last thing from a movement person. And he eschews movement politics, as he does on the YouTube. So clearly something happened with the individual Gavin Long, or Cosmo, that sent him on a mission with a rifle. But I think that something has happened with black folks as a whole too, that people have reached a kind of a point of inflection, and it has to do everything with the intransigence of this mass black incarceration state, with this police reign of terror. Here for 3 years now, under a black president, we have had black protests, militant black protests, demanding first and foremost indictments of killer cops. It boils down to that. Other issues are discussed, of course, the intersectionality of things, but it begins with the indictment of cops, and we get hardly any. And in Baltimore, of course, just recently, we see that there's not going to be any prospect of any of the cops actually being convicted in the death of Freddie Gray. So it is this intransigence that pushes black folks as a whole into a corner and raises questions for a movement, and it pushes individuals across an edge. And we know that that this point of inflection has been reached when we see the black former Miss Alabama, a beauty queen, calling Micah Johnson, the man who killed those 5 cops in Dallas, a martyr. We know that something has happened in the collective black psyche when it's difficult to get the average black person in the street to issue a blanket denunciation of Micah Johnson or now of Gavin Long. And there is no reason to believe that if this intransigence on the part of the power structure, which tells lies instead of reining in these cops, there's no reason to expect that we won't have further responses such as this, sacrifices such as this, martyrdoms, if you will, such as this.
Right. So here we are just ending an administration that had a black president, President Barack Obama, a Department of Justice head who, Eric Holder, and now Loretta Lynch. And here we have 3 African Americans in leadership roles who all these years hadn't even collected data on police shootings and how it's affecting the black community, which we all know is a problem in this country. In fact, the Guardian newspaper in the UK in 2015 started collecting that data and found that there were 1,134 deaths at the hands of police officers, where almost 15% of them were African Americans. Now, this kind of negligence, which there's no other word for it other than that, of negligence, how do you begin to address a problem in a country with any policy if you don't have the data?
Well, when you don't have the data, it's not that you just don't care about the people that you kill in that kind of negligent fashion. I think it's an affirmative act to cover up the killing, to make it difficult to prosecute the killing, to make it difficult to even make the charge that these mass killings go on because, well, where's the evidence? So, no, this is an active kind of police and prosecutorial and power establishment conspiracy. You have to call things as they are. A conspiracy among all of these different police departments conspiring to withhold the evidence of their crimes. And they conspire with politicians to suppress legislation that would make them gather and then give up the evidence of their crimes. And then we have a president who in Dallas, while he was commiserating with the families of the dead cops there and sanctifying them, told a damn lie and said that these days we don't have police brutalizing protesters. And just, I think, the day before, that's exactly what they were doing in Baton Rouge. And I think it's fair to say that the death of those 3 cops in Baton Rouge was a direct result of the brutality by the cops in Baton Rouge. And the frustration among black folks on a larger scale is in having a black president, that is the highest office to which blacks can aspire, who does nothing about the basic complaint, which is rein in, bring in, indict those killer cops.
All right, Glenn, I thank you so much for joining me today and this very important thing. And I just wanted to correct myself in that quote I stated from The Guardian. Of the 1,134 people that were killed, 15% were black men between the ages of 15 and 34. So there was a lot more blacks in that entire figure, but this was the 15% was between 15 and 34. I thank you so much for joining us, Glenn.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.